This morning we come to the end of our series on how knowing Jesus transforms us. Today our last talk is on how knowing Jesus transforms our purpose. And to talk about this, I recently spoke with someone I work with through the Reuse Network, a national charity that I chair. His name is Pete Everett and he leads an amazing Christian charity and social enterprise, the Lighthouse Furniture Project, and as their CEO. Based in Essex, the project's heart is to help those on low incomes, in poverty or in crisis, by providing low-cost furniture and appliances. And they're able to do this through the generosity of the local communities who donate items which they then sell to the general public to raise funds, or that they offer at a reduced price or completely free of charge to those most in need. In reusing furniture and electrical appliances, they divert over 400 tonnes of items from landfill each year, promoting what we call the circular economy. So, as well as helping to lift people out of poverty, Lighthouse is also doing good for the planet. I asked Pete about his journey and how God had made clear to him his God-given purpose through it.
So I didn't grow up in a family that went to church. I started going to a group with a friend, and then his mum had told him that he had to go to an event on a green one Thursday evening, and I think I was the least threatening of his friends that would judge him, so he invited me along. And for the first time, I heard about this guy called Jesus, and what he'd done for me, and I knew that I had to respond to it. So, of the age of just about becoming 15, I made a commitment, and really, my life has been a journey with him. Now I'm now 46, so it's 31 years of being a Christian, and I think it's always been a motivation to the directions that I've followed and where I am now. I think as a young Christian, trying to understand more about God, it became as I grew in my understanding of Him, it helped me to understand how I can reflect Him in the situations that I went into, but also how I can let Him lead me. And even from an early age, I went through college in a rather unconventional way. So I was the only guy on a nursery nursing course.
Oh wow!
I'd mucked up my GCSEs and I retook my GCSEs, and while I was there, I had a lovely sixth form tutor who basically told me I wasn't university material, and I thought, well, if this is where I'm going to do my A levels, I needed to pray and find out where it was, and people had already said to me that I was great with kids, so I trained as a nursery nurse, and then I got trained as a teacher from that.
Ah, right.
And I sort of then went to university and qualified as a teacher, and then taught for 10 years. And as I've done different things, I can already I can look back and see that was a real foundation time where God was grounding my faith. And as I've grown deeper in trying to step out and trust Him in some of those decisions, for me, my faith is not what I do with people midweek and then at the weekend. It's how I live every part of my life. I'm as much demonstrating my faith and worshipping where I am right now, which is in a room that's full of bedding, and my desk is in the corner because that's just the way we find space. Yeah. At Lighthouse. Yeah. But it's the way that we allow God to work through us, and as we do so, we begin to align with what's important to Him. Yeah. I've been teaching for about 10 years, and at the time, I was my wife was a head teacher, was a deputy head at the time, and we'd go to do our planning on the weekend, and she would do it in like an hour and a half, and it would take me sort of like the whole day, because there were certain bits of it that I was really good at, and there were certain bits that I wasn't. And I think part of that recognition was that I was good at helping people think about ways to do things well. And it was, again, a part of me understanding who I am, and not trying to not trying to fit myself into a mold of any kind, but trying to understand what my strengths and weaknesses were, and embrace those weaknesses. And I think being a Christian, that's a lot easier than it is in the modern world. I think I am where I am today is because I've not only embraced my weakness, but I've handed it over to God.
Good. And
actually it's my dependence on him in those things that allows me to be strong. Yeah, I came out of teaching and went into school improvement, bizarrely. And then from that, I got made redundant because the funding for my role disappeared. And at that point, it was like, okay, God, where do you want me? What's going on? And I managed to get a role within the local authority to do, within commissioning, and it was completely new to me. I was able to use the skills that I gained in other ways. But it was very much every day was like, okay, God, I don't know what you're doing with me here. I don't understand it, but let me do my best in all that I do. Let my worship be that I'm doing my best in each and every situation. Looking back at it now, I can see that it gave me experience in understanding how local authorities work. I was dealing with budgets and I was dealing with finances and grants and things like that as well. I was actually the person that people would send grant applications for grants for. So I knew exactly what it was looking for. And actually, I look back at that and I look back at the roles that I've had and I can see how they've prepared me for that next step.
Yeah.
And every time I've done that, every time I've taken a step out, it's been taking me out of my comfort zone. I'm actually stepping out for God. And that's how I feel I've approached it every single time I've moved jobs. Well, I'd moved out of commissioning into a development officer role for a service that was part of the Troubled Families agenda. So it was basically to try and stop families going up into social care. And as I was a development officer for the whole of the service across Essex. I was being able to go in and help people think about how they would respond to families holistically. The limitation with that, always with the local authority, is that the spiritual aspect of holistic is never there. It's just not something that they would see on the radar. And I'd been trying to push that in different ways. But I think alongside this, what I and my wife we'd got comfortable. We were both in jobs that we could pretty much do quite easily, and we'd got used to it. And I think for me, I felt like there was a point where I wasn't trying as hard because I could do it and I didn't need to push myself because I was my own boss to an extent, and I never had people that really pushed me. That didn't mean I didn't try hard, but but I recognised that there was I felt challenged, and as I was spending time with God in that time, as I was reading His Word, and as I was trying to understand more about what His plans and purposes were for me, and I was seeking Him, an opportunity to move into the charity sector came in, and I had the first interview. Then I had a night to prepare for the second interview.
Oh dear!
And but actually, I could see God's hand in it, and as I spoke, they felt I was the right person to move that role, and that, for us, that made a massive change because it was a geographical change in location.
Right.
We actually ended up, we couldn't sell our house because the market just wouldn't sell, so we ended up renting it, and that was a real blessing in itself. God's provision in that. We ended up moving to Eastbourne, and that's where I was working for a charity.
Right.
And I'll be honest with you, working for that charity was really hard because I was meant to be going in to sort of work with the founders with the idea of them stepping back. Right. And while I was there, it just, for a lot of reasons, I don't think they were ready for that change. Right. And it just meant that they needed to look at a different direction. And my time there wasn't my happiest, but at the same time, I can look back at it and now and say, if I hadn't had that experience, if I hadn't seen and learned from the things that happened there, I wouldn't be the person I am now. I wouldn't be, and I wouldn't have had that experience that meant that when I applied for the role that I'm now in, I would have been considered. You know, our primary source of how we understand God is by reading His Word.
Mm.
And actually, while I've been as I do that, and as I then listen, because I think it's all very well listening and praying, but sometimes you need to give yourself time to actually listen to what God might be saying.
Mm.
And in each of the times that I've made a step out for Him, I've always had this sense of peace in knowing that I'm pushing a door, and I'm recognizing that if that door closes, then there's something else that He has planned for me.
Right.
And it's that trust of doing that. I've also feel I've got people that I would talk to and pray with about things. I've always had people that I've had like accountability partners, or try to have people that I would go, look, this is what I feel God's challenging me with at the moment, and allowing others to speak into my life, recognizing that they're coming, and they may be that voice that the Holy Spirit has prompted them to say things and stuff like that as well. When I realised that they were looking at moving things into a different direction, and it wouldn't involve me in the charity, I'd looked for a role, and this job came up, and my wife and I talked about it, and I'd looked at roles local to Eastbourne, and again, nothing had really stood out. And then when Lighthouse Furniture, the job for the Lighthouse Furniture came up, I knew about it. I knew about Lighthouse Furniture because Lighthouse Furniture, before my time, had helped set up a reuse centre in Rayleigh,
right,
which was at the church that we used to go to. So I know the person that's running that one, and we'd been there praying with them at the very outset of when it all happened.
Right.
So we knew very much about what its purpose was. So I talked about it with Nikki, and we said, look, we've got to push doors, and we've got to see what's going on. So we came up and we had an interview. I had an interview, and again, whenever I've walked into interviews, I always go, I know that God's going to give me the words to say. I have that promise that He wants us to grow. He wants us to fulfill our plans and purposes for Him. And actually, if this is His plan and purpose, then He will make it happen.
Yeah.
And I think that recognizing that you're not doing it alone, recognizing that there's something bigger going on, brings that sense of peace. And I felt confident as I walked in, and I felt that I could articulate myself well enough to be able to answer their questions. But for me, the fact this is a Christian charity was a fundamental. Right. The fact that this is a place that has a set of values that it lives out. And I think that's what I was trying to emphasize in the things that I do, and that I recognized that I didn't have all the skills that were there because of my limited experience, but that I knew that I could develop and work and develop the team and develop the vision for this place, to bring those kingdom cultures that we all know through it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what made the trustees choose me. Right. So alongside this, of course, my wife has got a job now down in Eastbourne as well. And we've got this house that we're renting up here that we had another 8 months on before the lease was running out. And again, a job just popped up in Essex County Council. My wife was a head teacher. She'd moved into school improvement as well.
Right.
And she was a specialist teacher.
Oh.
Within a week of that, our tenants gave their notice.
Oh, wow.
So they were moving out in a month, sort of in the end of March.
Yeah.
And the end of May they were at the end of April they were moving out. So 2 years ago,
right?
Or 3 years ago rather, and then I was able to come back, and whilst I'd started here, I was doing a bit of a trawl backwards and forwards, right. And I was able to redecorate the house in my evenings. I was working here, so that when we moved back in, we were moved back into our old home in exactly where we were, and then we managed to get spaces for the girls in the same school that they'd come from. So, context to the Lighthouse Furniture Project, it started from a local church. It started from a local church that went to their local council and said, how can we help you? So in 1994, that's when it first started. And it started with them helping them save items that were in council properties where people had vacated and left them behind. Right. They were too good to be thrown away, but they didn't have the capacity or the staff to manage taking those things out and then redistributing them. Now, the church did that for 10 years with a small trailer and 6 garages, and they started getting offered more and more. And that's how Lighthouse started. Right. So Lighthouse, from the very beginning, has had God at the centre of it. It is here to serve, and it's here to do that. And when I came, for me, I needed to get to know the people, and I needed to get that, but I needed to make sure that they recognised that, when I first came, there were some people that were said we're a charity with Christian values, and there would be some people that say we're a Christian charity, and there's a difference. And I've been spending time with them and them getting to know me and being very transparent about my faith, and also being integrous as well. There's very well. Any place can have a set of values that says this and this, but if you don't live it out, and that's part of what faith is, isn't it? It's not just a word, it's an action, it's what we do. And what I've tried to do is model that, doing that, and so have the other Christians within the organisation as well. They've been doing that, and we've modelled that when something happens, we are that consistency, and we live them out, and that's been the fundamental. We do pray as well. Right. So we have a Monday morning meeting where we pray. And again, I think as with anything, you can get yourself into a pattern in how you do things. And I think when I came, I'd observed, because there was a transition period, how those Monday mornings had happened. And I started introducing a few changes straight away where we were being quite practical in the way that we prayed for things. Right. So we recognised that we can help as much as the stuff that with as much as we can with the stuff that we've got. And if we haven't got the stuff, then we can't help as much. And there were times when the demand was really high for certain things. And let me give you this one example. It was I've been here about 3 months. It was, I think, the third month without the old CEO around, I think it was. And we'd had this real demand for refrigerators. And I know that sounds like under-counter refrigerators. Lots of them, there were lots of people that were coming with needing support, and all they needed were refrigerators, and we had none. They were just not there, and we were struggling to get them through donations and other ways. So I'd started saying to them, let's pray for the things that we need so that we can help the people that we can. So we prayed about under-counter fridges. 20 minutes later, I get this phone call offering us 144 fridges from a council that had 6 months ago had bought the wrong fridges for their temporary accommodation, and they were having to replace the whole lot. Oh no! So we got these 6-month-old fridges, all virtually brand new, and we had to pay a gate fee through the reuse network of £2 per one. Fridge. But we were able to bless so many people with that. And actually, what I think surprised the guys here a little bit was I said, we've got more than we need. Let's bless the other reuse partners nearby and give them to them. And actually, what now happens is when we pray for something and they see it, I hear the conversations of everybody else going, we prayed for that again. And look, God, we've got it. There's something in that prayer lock, and and it's just really exciting. And I have to be honest with you, I have more conversations with the guys that are non-Christians about God than I do with anybody else. So it is very much a mission field, but it comes from them seeing Christ in me and seeing how I and the other guys that are here live that out. In the first lockdown, we we cut things right down. You know, we didn't know what was going to happen, so there was only 3 of us working. We spent a lot of time actually using the vans to do other stuff to support other activity locally, because we weren't seeing we were helping people in crisis and stuff like that. But when it got to the November lockdown, some of the services that had been cut in that initial one remained open, and myself and the trustees knew that was helping a lot of people. So we have something called the Essential Living Fund locally, which is a government funding that supports people in crisis, and we are one of the main providers of that,
right,
in Essex. And we knew that if we only stayed open for that during the lockdowns, that we would be operating at a loss. But we knew that we knew that it was the right thing to do, and we knew that yes, we would eat into our reserves, and it would do so. So we did it for the November one. We took a hit of about £20,000 in remaining open. And when we were open in between there and Christmas, in 3 weeks, we made effectively a month and a half's salary sales to help offset some of that. But when we went into January, we then had 3.5, nearly 4 months of being closed, which we continue to do. And during that time, we saw the equivalent of nearly 2 years worth of normal referrals through the Essential Living Fund in that period of time.
Wow.
But we effectively halved our reserves. Our reserves went from being something like 80,000 down to 40.
Right.
Okay. When we opened, we didn't know what was going to happen, but we trusted. And what was really exciting is just seeing God honor that.
Wow. Yeah.
And within that month, we'd almost doubled. We put like £50,000 back into our reserves. That's, our motivation is seeing God work in our community and working with others to do that, and actually being a place that brings hope to people. We can, people might say, oh, it's only furniture, it's only a cooker, but actually, if you understand anything about things like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, our needs are, we need to feel safe and we need to have those basic elements. And part of furniture poverty is recognizing that if you haven't got a bed, guess what? You're not going to sleep well. That means that the way you respond to everything else is going to be impacted. You haven't got somewhere where you can cook properly and have the things that you need. All those things that we take absolutely for granted. If you don't have those things, you can't then think about anything else.
Exactly.
Your ability to then think about how, about God in some way, shape, or form isn't there, because you're trying to deal with the immediate. And actually, what we're trying to do is use this place not just to help people at that level, but to use the actual organisation as a resource. So, we have people that have volunteered here that have been long-term out of work. And as a result of just volunteering here and being in the environment that enables, encourages, empowers, seeks to serve and bless, they get blessed at the same time. And we've done it anecdotally recently, but we've seen people that have come here and felt enabled and been able to go off and get a job as a result of it. And we're trying to look at how we can do that more intentionally. And I think my journey has been as God revealing that part of that commission is not just to deal with the spiritual, but it's to work in partnership with others to holistically support those people.
Great.
Spiritual is a really important factor of it.
Of course.
Actually, for me, it's about how we support our community and be that light in the community. We're at a really exciting time at the moment. We recognise that there's opportunities to grow, and we also recognise there's a growing need in our area, and there's a bit of an inequality across Essex about how people can get support. So I've been praying about this. We've been praying about it with in terms of the future as well, and we've had some real answers to that. just in the last week, I'd been talking about it with my operations manager and talking about the opportunity to do that. And the next day he came up to me and just said, "Have you seen the email? Have you seen the email?" And he said, "You've been praying." And it was an email from, I found out, a Christian woman in a particular area where we'd been talking about where we'd need to have a new base if we were going to cover the whole of the county. And she's from the local churches there. And there's a real appetite for them to get involved and potentially do something in that area. So I'm meeting with her tomorrow, and we just need to pray that's a real opportunity, and that we can see that turn into fruition.
Thanks, Pete. I hope you all got something from listening to Pete. I certainly did. Do you ever find yourself struggling to find your God-given purpose in life? Do you know, your dissatisfaction, your gifts, your obvious gifts, your passions, or the voices of others could be telling you that you were created for another purpose. Isaiah 43 and verse 7 tells us we were created for God's glory, and so the right thing to do is to bring glory to God, because there is no one greater who's worthy of our trust and adoration and worship. And that's what Pete was sharing in his talk. We also heard from Pete what his journey was like. But how do we do it? How do we find out what our God-given purpose is? Here are some steps to finding our God-given purpose that I've summarised from Pete's talk, plus a few that I've thrown in myself. First one, read the Bible. Do you know, God has given us a source of knowledge and wisdom in his word. And his word is a living word. So that means it still speaks to us today. It's the source that can help us find our God-given purpose. To live a life with both passion and purpose, we must continually learn who Jesus is and what he says our purpose in life is. So we were created in God's image, and Christ is our example and reflects the character traits and the attitudes that we should seek to live out in a daily basis. Second, pray for guidance. Do you know, prayer and meditating on God's word help us attain peace and to gain a sense of direction. Do you know, that's why a daily time spent in prayer and waiting to hear from God can be so powerful. Do you know, sometimes I pray for guidance on how to deal with a situation, or for the right words for a meeting I'm about to go into. And recently for peace and guidance in job interviews. And especially to help me to recognise if the job that I'm applying for is in fact fitting in with God's purpose in my life. As you seek your purpose, understand that each day we live is a gift from God, and we should ask him how he wants us to make the most of it and to help us live it in faith. Ephesians 2 and verse 10 tells us we're God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God had prepared in advance for us to do. Isn't that exciting? God has called us to a purpose, that is, to do good works. And do you know what? They've been tailor-made just for you and me. So there's no comparing to one another. And also, God gives us the gifts or the skills, or certainly gives us the opportunities to develop the gifts to be able to accomplish our purpose. You know, we heard that from Pete. Third, submit to God. For all of us to live out our God-given purpose, first we need to put down this life to gain life. In Proverbs 19 and verse 21 it says, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." Do you know, that means we might have lots of ideas and dreams and plans about what we want to do with our lives and how we see our lives turning out. But you know, it's God's plans and purposes that are more important. That is, if we want to be a true follower of Jesus. God has better plans for us than we can sometimes imagine, and sometimes he does things which we may not be able to understand. But we need to trust him. 1 John 2 and verses 16 and 17 explain it this way. It says, For all that is in the world, that is the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride and possessions, is not from the Father, but from this world. And this world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God lives forever. What this is telling us is that it's futile to focus on temporary things and pleasures and ambition, because on our deathbed we can't take it with us. Instead, in Matthew 6 and verse 33 it says, "But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." That means seek out God's purpose for your life and follow in his way of living as exampled by Jesus that we see in the Bible. And we will have pleasure and provision. God won't have us miss out. Fourth, the promises of God. So, seeking God's kingdom is the key to living out our purpose. But how do we do that? Well, one way is to start looking at the many promises of God in his word and applying them to our lives. Do you know, there are over 3,000 promises of God, and here I'm going to just highlight a few that I believe relate to us finding out our God-given purpose. The first one, in Jeremiah 29 and verse 11, it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope." Isn't that exciting? Isn't it encouraging? You know, so when life looks tough or things aren't turning out as we expected them to, we just need to remind ourselves that God promises us he has plans for our good and not for disaster. And you know, God's gifts are good and perfect, and they come from a God who's not whimsical. He doesn't change his mind. He doesn't blow with the wind. He doesn't get it wrong. And one of my favourites is from Romans 8, verses 28 and 29. It says, "In all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose, which is to be conformed to the likeness of his Son." All things. So, if we're living according to God's purpose, then all things will work to our good. Now, this shows how important it is to be sure we're living out God's purpose for our lives. You'll know of other promises, so take time to review them and start applying them to your life and circumstances. Maybe write them down and start memorising them. Do you know, when challenge comes, and it will, when negative thoughts and criticism come, and they will, remind yourself of the promises God has made to you. The one way of fighting the devil, the father of lies, is with Scripture. He hasn't got to come back. Fifthly, applying God's purpose. Now, we heard Pete talk about his gifts and talents. And very often, the things we're good at may be God pointing to our purpose. So start with looking at what you're good at. What are your gifts? Remember, all good gifts come from the Father. Then, what do you love doing? What's your passion? What gets you up in the morning? What gets you excited? And overlay what you love doing and what you're good at doing, and that starts pointing to purpose and potential professions and vocations. Now I'm going to finish with a personal challenge to each of us. And my challenge to us all this morning is to live your life in a way that glorifies God, but also that you march to your own drum. That is, you don't need to be like anybody else. Do you know, we're all created in his image, and we each are unique, and none of us will experience the same things in life. Take time to consider your purpose, and most of all, dream big, pray big, and then seek to do God's will.